episode 119 of the 4Ps, and it's getting warmer out, and I'm getting increasingly hot and bothered by the collective stupidity of our declining civilization. Let's start with the increase in cases of COVID-19 in so many places that have relaxed intelligent protections like masks and social distancing. This is something practical. While New York and New Jersey have done a great job so far, the rest of the country is swimming in new cases, and the spread of this virus is happening at alarming rates. Testing and medical equipment are still woefully not available, and the lack of federal leadership, now combined with grossly ineffective state leadership in at least half of our states, is becoming a recipe for disaster. Every other country is flattening the curve, and ours is not. I always thought that New York City would be the last safe place to open up, but I no longer believe that that's going to be safe to do anywhere anytime soon. Why? If people wore masks with complete compliance, it would be a different story. But we need to find different ways to get through to people who just don't want to be told what to do, even if it means keeping them and the rest of us safe. We have to find new ways to get through to them. Something personal. If you're anything like me, you've had an increasingly difficult time staying silent when others around you, maybe family or friends or neighbors or even complete strangers online, are professing opinions that you just don't align with or don't align with your reality, especially when you're right and they're wrong. People disagreeing with us is the worst. The choice can be stark, though. We can either risk a fight or we fall into tense, unpleasant silence, which is why I was so intrigued to learn more about how to properly disarm these people when someone recommended that I read a book called How to Have Impossible Conversations. You know the main idea without me even needing to say it. Impossible conversations are things that just feel futile. It can be productive when they become collaborative, but that isn't what's really trending. Basically, if someone's willing to talk, there's a chance you can have a productive conversation. Beliefs can and do change, but there are good ways and bad ways to change them. We live in an age of growing partisanship with real ideological differences, but we're also forgetting the art of conversation. When we actually listen to people and stop lecturing them and learn to voice our disagreements civilly, we can start changing each other's minds and reevaluating our own beliefs. Now, some of this sounds overly idealistic because some people are not open to changing their minds. And don't waste time with these people, no matter how frustrating. But giving up really isn't an option in an advanced society for most of the things that we're talking about at this point. So, step one, if you want to change someone's mind, you have to listen to them. Everyone finds it deeply satisfying just to be heard. Base your conversations on this psychological insight, and your rewards can be huge. Find common ground. It's easier to talk openly and air disagreements when you build rapport. Use conversation to help people reevaluate their beliefs. The only way to do this, though, without offending others, is to build rapport. The big thing in trying to change someone's mind is first planting a seed of doubt to destroy their illusion of understanding. If you want to change someone's mind, you have to let them generate their own doubts. People are much more likely to accept self-generated ideas than messages delivered from others or by others. It's like Jedi mind tricking them. And one way to do this is by modeling ignorance. If you want someone to recognize the limits of their own knowledge, you have to pretend to be ignorant and invite them to explain or give an explanation of their POV to you, and then get further and deeper into the nitty-gritty of topics, all the while continuing to feign ignorance and let them try and rationalize it, and you ask little questions here and there. Ultimately, not everyone forms their beliefs on this basis of evidence, however. And this is my biggest challenge with this book. When beliefs are driven by moral or social considerations, facts rarely cut through. But be armed with them anyway. be prepared. And if after all of those tactics you can't get through to people, then it's worth reevaluating whether they can and should be people in your life. Something political-ish. We're more than halfway through the month of June, which is Pride Month, hashtag. And I've been so distracted by so many things going on that I haven't even mentioned it. Pride has always been one of my favorite celebrations, not just because it always falls around my birthday, and New York City's Pride parade and festivities always felt like a great big gay birthday party for me every year. No, it's because it celebrates the greatest gift ever endowed to human beings. And that's love. The freedom to love who you want. Yet here we are in June of 2020, and LGBTQ rights are still sometimes under attack, and in some pretty overt ways. Last week, the Trump administration erased and rolled back protections for trans Americans in healthcare, that were put in place initially by the Obama administration. Their goal here was to narrow the legal definition of sex discrimination so that it does not include protections for transgender people. In short, the federal government no longer wanted to recognize gender identity when it comes to discrimination by doctors, health insurance companies, and hospitals. Now, under the original 2016 rule, healthcare providers and insurers would have been required to provide and cover medically appropriate treatments for transgender patients. These are men and women who already face significant personal and social challenges. So the last thing they need is inequality under the law. Imagine a doctor turning someone away for a COVID-19 test just because they happen to be transgender right now. That's totally fine, according to this change. The good news, of course, is that courts are where this battle will ultimately be won. Nothing actually changed in last week's administration decision. So the fact that this is still being challenged in court and will likely be another thing potentially tried in the Supreme Court within the next 2 years is a good thing. And that means the final rule doesn't actually have any immediate practical effects yet. Even a conservative-leaning court has ruled in favor of protecting LGBTQ Americans over the past few years, including the past few weeks. And this week, when their landmark ruling that a federal civil rights law protecting gays, lesbians, and trans workers could be upheld. The 1964 Civil Rights Act is now extended to all LGBTQ Americans. That is a massive step forward for progress, and we need to ensure that we don't take steps back, because progress isn't possible when you go back. Progress is only possible when we move forward. And a little something professional for you marketers, advertisers, brand people out there. Amidst so much change and upheaval in the marketing industry, it's interesting, but not entirely surprising, to see some previous trends start to either break down or collapse, and others get even more pronounced. And one of those trends over the past 2 to 3 years was the increasing investment by brands and companies in the in-house agency capabilities, right, for those brands and enterprise companies. There have even been a number of pros and cons widely discussed by industry leaders and companies, but with COVID-related disruption and the re-examination of costs that are now happening and have to happen, many of those brands are finding that fixed versus variable costs actually favor working with agencies again. Not necessarily opposed to in-house, but certainly limiting the amount of long-term, permanent investment that brands are making. When you lose revenue quickly, you have less money to spend. The goal is to do the most efficient amount of activity and effort and maximize the value that somewhat minimized activity can achieve. That's what happens in economic downturns. This is how agencies are used to working, and operators are standing by to take your call.